What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with another episode of Millzy Revisits. This is my series where I am rebrewing and taking a look back at all of my main decks and the decks up there in my test box. If you're looking for more information in this series, go back and check out my episode on Goreclaw, where I explain a little bit more about the why. But the deck we're going to talk about today is my rebrew of Winota, Joiner of Forces from Ikoria. She is a Boros commander, red-white, and a lot of this deck is based upon trying to aggro as fast as we can. You're probably asking yourself, but Millzy, Commander isn't really a format that supports aggro. Not a lot of aggro decks exist, and you'd be right. Aggro is a very tough strategy to play in Commander. But the thing I found with Winota is that when you're given an ability like Winota has, it's very easy to aggro if you do it the right way. So Winota says whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains an indestructible till end turn. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can take Winota. The CDH lists of Winota go into the stacks route and shutting your opponents down and winning that way. I do have a few kind of, I wouldn't call them stacks pieces. I would call them more slow your opponents down pieces. At the end of the day, this deck is intended to go as fast as possible. The biggest way that the deck does that is with cards like Dragon Fodder, Krenko's Command, Hordeling Outburst, and, Raise the Alarm. These cards that are going to make tokens on turn 2 and 3 as much as possible. And then on turn 4, our goal is to get Winota down, take a big swing, and start looking for some key humans off the top of our library. So in the Goreclaw video, I just used Moxfield. I went top down. We're not playing any Planeswalkers with Winota, so I guess we'll start with the creatures. We have to pick a good split between humans and non-humans. And the reason is because we want to make sure that, that we have enough humans to hit off the top of the library when we go searching. But we also want good non-human creatures that are going to A, be able to attack, or B, give us good value. So first we'll talk about the non-human creatures, and then we'll talk about the human creatures. So first off, we have Legion Loyalist. 1 mana, comes down with haste. But the big thing is whenever it and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control gain first strike and trample till end turn and can't be blocked by creature tokens. There's very seldom a time where that last ability doesn't lead to an even better attack than it was before. First strike and trample is really important, especially when people can just chump block things, right? When people can just throw little 1/1s in front of any of your things that come down, those blocks aren't much of a second thought. But when you start having to think about first strike and trample and winning combats that way, Winota gives all of those humans that come down indestructible. She does not give the tokens that we're attacking with indestructible. So what I like about Legion Loyalist is it gives all of those tokens first strike and trample, which tends to at least help them a little bit more in combat versus they would alone. Dockside, of course, getting us the mana if we need it. Selfless Spirit is cool because we're never going to get it off the top with Winota, but we always don't mind playing it and attacking with it, and then we can sack it to give all of our creatures indestructible, so we can hopefully avoid a board wipe that way. Archon of Emiria is one of our first, what I would call slow your opponents down pieces. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and then non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Now, I know there's already going to be someone out there that says, Millzy, that's a stacks piece. The difference here is I'm not looking to shut the game out forever. Archon of Emiria is coming down to help win me the game by turn 5, turn 6. The goal of this deck is to win as quickly as possible, and any of these stacks-esque pieces are simply there to help me win the game as quickly as possible. There's no intention here to drag the game out any longer than it has to be drug out. We want to win the game as quick as we can and not let our foot off the gas in the hope that we can just end the game. And if we can't end the game on the first combat with this deck, it's going to be a very high opportunity that we end the game on the second combat. Goblin Rival Master and Legion Warboss do the same thing. We play them, they make an extra token every combat, and eventually they start swinging with their tokens. Krenko, Tinstrig Kingpin, whenever it attacks, we get tokens equal to its power. This is great because it comes down. The first time it attacks, it's probably attacking in one of those big swings with Winota. And then the next turn, we have all of those tokens from Krenko that are going to then attack the next turn and create an even bigger attack. And to be honest, that's really the biggest amount of non-human creatures. The only last one is Karlach, a Fairy of Avernus, because whenever we attack, if it's the first combat, we untap all attacking creatures, get a second one. If we have an entire full board of tokens and we attack with Winota, and then we attack with Winota's ability, and we also get a Karlach ability, I would have a tough time believing we couldn't end the game in one combat. Every single human that comes in is going to help us really and truly end the game, that combat. And the biggest one is Angrath's Marauders. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. Angrath coming down tends to be the thing that ends most games, and it's the one thing we want to look for, because it's going to help all of our creatures hit for double. And yes, 5 or 6 or 7 2/2s coming at you is not that big of a deal. But when they start dealing twice the damage apiece, you're going from 15, 16, 18 damage to 36, 38 damage. And you could start to see where this starts to stack up. But it's not just Angrath's Marauders. It's things like Silverwing Squadron comes in. It's a star, where star is the number of creatures we control. It's coming in flying as well. And if our opponents don't have a blocker, this most of the time hits for massive damage. We have things like Rick that's going to come down, buff all of our humans that are coming in and giving good pressure. Blade Historian, all attacking creatures now have double strikes. So you could see double strike plus something like Marauders is going to start stacking up quickly. Thalia, of course, when it comes in, we get a kind of blind obedience effect, but also for non-basic lands. Tajik going to prevent all non-combat damage will be dealt to our creatures. Mural's going to come down and prevent our opponents from playing spells. Odric, if we can attack with it, is going to allow us to just end the game a lot more quicker, and basically saying that our opponent's creatures aren't going to block. Duke can give some of our tokens Myriad to get more Winota triggers. Darian is going to help us. So if we take that big attack with the humans, or take our big attack, anyone that deals damage to us is just going to hand us more tokens that get into more Winota triggers. The entirety of this base, it hasn't changed very much from the last version of the list. I think the only thing I added was Legion Loyalist back in. This was back in an older list. And then Recruiter of the Guard, because Recruiter of the Guard can get Loyalist, it can get Dockside, and it can get Magistrate, it can get Loyal Apprentice, it can get Selfless Spirit. It can get a lot of these cheaper guys that are a little bit more toolboxy. So Recruiter of the Guard is there for that. But this has not changed very much. I think Gerard's newer as well. Gerard can kind of help us from board wipes. But again, non-creature tokens or non-human tokens down, attack, get humans. Now, as far as the sorcery goes, you can see this is all built around tokens. This is all built around going as fast as we can. There's very to little no mass removal, because in my view, we don't need it. If we're getting at the pace that we're going, we don't need the removal, because we will outpace every other deck at the table. Temp with Vengeance, Aganjo's Uprising are X's. We get to choose how many we want in there. Aganjo Uprising doesn't get a ton of love, and I think it's even better on this deck because I could care less about my opponents having blockers, because I'm going to outvalue them for every single Samurai token that I create. I do not care that they get half the amount each of them. Doesn't matter. Mine have haste and menace and are going to get me that many more humans that are just going to decimate whatever board my opponents have. Dragon Fodder, Krenko's Command, and I'm trying the new Clowning Around from Infinity. Gets you 2, but you have a chance to get a 3rd off the dice roll. These are the bread and butter cards with Raise the Alarm that you want to see quickly and you want to get down for turn 2. For turn 3, you want to see things like Hordeling Outburst, Legion, War Boss, Rabble Master. Those are the things you want to see on turn 3. So ideally by the end of turn 3, we want to see 2 to 4 creatures that aren't humans ready to go for turn 4 when we get Winota down and get the process going. Martial Coup is technically a board wipe, but more often than not, it's used to just create a few tokens. Same thing with something like Secure the Waste. It's just there to make a few tokens at our opponent's end step and get the thing primed and ready to go for the next strike. Indulge is in here because I think it's a great spell for the turn after we take our first big attack, where we're then going to get even more tokens tapped and attacking, and again, make our board even wider, make it harder to block. And then if we ever can actually get excess off, we're just going to make a ton of extra mana and hopefully keep it going. As far as instants, Boros Charm, Grand Crescendo, Flawless Maneuver, just protection for the board. We're never going to use Boros Charm for probably anything other than giving our board indestructible. And like, for example, if the strategy goes the way we want it to, turn 4, we're not even going to have extra mana for Boros Charm or Grand Crescendo. We ideally want to see Flawless Maneuver because we can play it for free when Winota's out. But if we have to play the other 2, we leave the 2 mana open and we, play with that in our hand. Enlightened Tutor is here because we have a couple enchantments we care about, but mostly we have just a couple pieces of removal and then protection. Getting into our artifacts and enchantments, the artifacts have actually changed since last time. Dolmen Gate came in. I'm kind of surprised it wasn't in before because Dolmen Gate is probably like the perfect artifact for this deck. I think the reason it wasn't in before is because I didn't realize that the 2 mana for Dolmen Gate is very worth it when your tokens that you attack with the first time just don't die. More often than not on that turn 4 when you dump Winota in, you're going to lose a couple tokens in the process, but you're gaining the humans so you don't care. What I love about Dolmen Gate is you're literally getting all of the upside of the Winota attack with none of the downside. And then Throne of the God Pharaoh is another way to help shut and end the game, because let's say I attack with 10 tokens, I get 10 humans in now tapped and attacking. On my end step, I am now doming everyone for 20. With, if they killed my creature, sure, it goes down. But I think even if it's 10, you can't survive this after a giant attack where you had to, lose all the creatures you had, maybe take a bunch of damage off bad blocks. Now, we're just going to push through for the rest. The biggest adds to the deck were Crypt and Chrome Mox, and the main reason these came in here was to push the Winota plan a turn forward if possible. Crypt, of course, could potentially move the Winota plan a turn forward. Chrome Mox probably could do the same depending on what we have in our hand. If we have one of those two mana token spells in our hand, we could potentially move the game up 1 turn with Chrome Mox, but most of the time I see Chrome Mox more or less giving us protection for Winota the turn it comes down rather than moving the clock up completely a turn. But again, they're in here to speed the deck up. Enchantments. 5 easy enchantments. These 4 have stayed the same. Authority of the Consuls, Deafening Silence, Blind Obedience is going to help slow our opponents down. Reconnaissance is going to effectively give our whole board vigilance, so if we want to, we can untap everything. And then Determined Duration is kind of cool. I was in the process of putting this into Jetmir, and I realized that this card I think does really well in Winota. At the start of combat, you populate, so you create a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. But the cool part is that token gains haste. So we pick a token we have, get a new one, our Winota attack gets +1 bigger. We get to find +1 more humans, all for 2 mana. So Enlightened Tutor is probably getting this guy or this guy more often than not. We want Authority of the Consuls more than we want Deafening Silence, because I'd much rather have my opponent's creatures come in tapped and not be able to block than them not be able to cast more than one spell, to be honest, because the blocker is the only thing that's going to stop this plan most of the time. Now, the next question you have is, Millzy, what if Winota gets countered? And sure, that is a possibility I've seen happen many times. Most of the time what happens is Winota gets countered, I still attack anyway, still get decent damage. I have to wait a turn cycle to get back, hopefully get up to 6 mana. And if I don't get up to 6 mana, congratulations, you beat the deck. That's the downside to this deck is it's not built to survive long term in a game. This is a deck that's built to go fast, win the game fast, and if you can survive that first onslaught, yes, that's what you need to do. But the problem is most decks in Commander are not built to survive a very quick attack. Especially if you've never seen Winota before. Even if you're holding that counterspell and you've never seen Winota before, you may not know that Winota is the thing to be worried about. You also may read Winota and think that she has to attack in order for you to get that ability. And so you may not realize that when I dump Winota down and then turn those tokens sideways and say, okay, I get 7 Winota triggers, you go, wait, hold on, what happened? And you may not realize, I've had a lot of people do that where they don't realize that she doesn't have to attack in order for you to get that ability, and you're way too late. As far as that goes, at that point, the deck is doing what it's intended to do, and it's already off to the races. Lands, not much has changed. To be honest, I've added the City of the Brass and the Mana Confluence just to pick up a little bit in speed. I got a copy of Inkmoth Nexus, so I threw that one in. The reason this is here is for turn 5 and 6. Same thing with like the Mishra's Factory. And Blinkmoth Nexus, on that turn 5 and 6, when you have the spare mana, you could turn these into creatures and make your attack even wider and even better. I considered Mishra's Foundry from Brothers War, but I just thought the 2 mana for the activation was a little expensive. I may end up throwing it back in maybe once I test this out a little bit more. Yes, I've thought about the the Carekeep land, and I might look into more of these lands that animate, maybe. I've got Den of the Bugbear in here, although it's a little more expensive just because it makes the token that's also attacking. And I've got Sokens on, which can make some tokens, but I'm going to look into more of these lands that can animate. But for the moment, I think I like these 3 because they all cost 1 mana, and that's not going to push you outside of what you're trying to do. I feel like there's not a lot of explanation with this deck because, to be 100% honest, there isn't much explanation to the strategy. Go fast, turn sideways, protect Winota when she first comes out so you get her ability off, and you really only need it to go off 1 time. Yes, it's a little bit of RNG about what humans you hit. Do you hit the good ones? Do you hit the bad ones? But there's a lot of humans like Captain of the Watch, Evangel of Heliod, Lena, that come in and make tokens when they come in. And then like Lena, for example, can protect the tokens. Captain of the Watch buffs the other tokens. There's a lot of humans in here that have really niche abilities or do cool things when they come in. You know, Adeline lets you make tokens when she attacks. When you attack, even if she isn't attacking. You know, there's so many humans in there with so many cool abilities. But the point of the matter is you want as many tokens as you can on the board by turn 4. Winota turn 4, turn sideways. If you can't finish the game on turn 4, you protect your board until turn 5. Untap turn 5. Try to get some more non-tokens on the battlefield. Swing again and just keep going. Just keep swinging. And most of the time, your opponents are not prepared on turn 4 for this attack. And if they weren't on turn 4, most of the time they're not prepared on turn 5. And the deck tends to clean up whatever it couldn't clean up that time. I have had a few games where you hit Rick off that first attack. You give your entire board lifelink. You give all your humans lifelink. And so at the end of turn 4, you've done 15 damage to everybody. And then you've gained 45. Now you're sitting at 60, 70 life, and even if your board gets wiped, look at the swing that you have now in advantage, and you just rebuild and reload the gun and do it again. So this deck is a ton of fun. I normally warn people before I pull this deck out. This deck is fast, and it's intended to be fast, and it's just a fun deck to play. It's fun to see what people have, what they think they can do. And when people ask that they want this type of experience, I'm overjoyed to pull it out and see what they think of this high-powered, fast kind of experience. I don't consider this a CDH deck because, to be honest, this would get blown up by any removal. That's the point of the way that I brewed this. It's susceptible to removal. It's susceptible to counter spells, and I'm okay with that. I feel like that's the way to keep the game fair, right? In the kind of normal ways of Standard, aggro gets countered by control, right? It gets countered by a deck that can take out the important pieces before they can ever go off. And so I think that's what makes the deck fun. I think that's what makes the deck kind of a challenge, is can you get yourself in underneath some of those big decks before they can go off? And can you kind of maneuver around that? Now, if I wanted to make this a CDH deck, most of it would go out the window. I would bring in a lot more stacks pieces. You'd bring in a lot more mana. I'm not playing any mana geysers. I'm not playing any things like that. Like those would come in. It would be a whole different list. But I think I enjoy the kind of battle cruisery aggro that we get to play. And I think it goes far. So I'm going to try to playtest this, but there's absolutely no way for me to playtest the Winota triggers. I'm not going to do it. I refuse to sit here and waste the time. I will get us to that first attack, and then we'll see what we have. We have 2 lands. We have the Nexus. We have Authority of the Consuls. We have the Blade Historian. This kind of stinks because Blade Historian and Bruce Tall are 2 of those ones we'd prefer to hit off the top. But I think I would still keep this hand, so let's give it a shot. Turn 1... Command Tower Consuls. Turn 2, Inkmoth Nexus, Dolmen Gate. Turn 3, I'd probably go Sundown Pass, Legion Loyalist. Turn 4, I'm thinking City of Brass, Blade Historian. And then turn 5, Mishra's Foundry, Winota. And we'd only get the 1 trigger, but I think we would get set up for a decent portion here. It does have double strike. The Hema that comes down would have double strike. And then the next turn here would more than likely be Tomb, Agando's Uprising, and we're going to get a giant attack. We could have, instead of this on that turn, we could have Agando's Uprising then, but I think that's the better plan. And I doubt someone has removal on the way back around that we couldn't get around, because then, if that's the case, if someone nukes Winota here, we draw Agando's Uprising and probably just push again all the strategy through, because now our samurais have menace and double strike, which means they're probably going to push through anything that blocks them. And then we get to the same strategy thing. The other cool part here is because of this consoles being down turn 1, for this round right here, I doubt many creatures are untapped and ready to block whatever's going to come through. I would have loved to have probably this turn, I would have tapped this to turn on the Inkmoth and then used this for the rest of it, just so we have another added non-human creature to swing with. But that goes to show you, that was actually a pretty slow hand compared to what you want to look for, just because of the lack of a type effect before we could get Winota down. But I think even in a hand like that, you still get to see how the deck, once it hits its mass, is going to go off, and it's going to be fun to deal with. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know what you think of the deck, what you would add, what you would change, what your general opinions are of it. Give me a like and subscribe if this is the kind of thing you want to see more of. Like I said, I'm going to go through all my main decks, all of the decks that are in their last stage of testing before I build them, and then we'll probably do some sort of series for the rest of the decks that I have laying around that I've been testing out and I am rebuilding and talking about. But thank you guys so much, and I will catch you next time.